one of the things to reconsider in light of the realities that are now manifest is to revise what's been going on in NATO over the last 10 years. Now it's funny, Macron, the leader of France, right? He famously quipped that NATO is a brain dead organization. Now at the time he said this was before Finland and Sweden decided to join, that Turkey tried to block, Turkey and Hungary. But if we go back, the French were on board with bombing Libya, and look what's become of Libya. Libya is divided up now between Turks and Russians that are then human torpedoing Europe via Italy, which is full of just crime. Now, if we look to the Balkans, what was their other dumb thing they did there? Well, let's not say dumb, but they did bomb Serbia. Now, Serbia is a Russian satellite. But who were they backing? They were backing the Kosovo Muslims, which are a Turkic faction. So who won in that? The Turks. Turks and Albanians, and they're also part of the international. You go back to what they were doing under Tito, these are just straight up and down terroristic countries. So their government changed and then nothing changed, sort of per the Russian model. They had their government collapsed, they're now a democracy. Sure they are. NATO is backing them up. Why? This is why you got to go back to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Who kicked that off? Well, the Serbians were the Russian satellite that, via hybrid attacks, attacked the Austrians, who at that time had an empire. The Austrians mobilized, which caused the Russians to mobilize, which caused the Germans to mobilize, which caused the French to mobilize. You see how that works? So those political fault lines have not gone away at all. They've just become more radicalized and more hybrid. So you could look at the NATO involvement there as a continuation of those dynamics, but with hybrid characteristics. Now you got the NATO working for the Turks, basically, who are working with the Russians. Oh, and the French were the both behind both of those boondoggles, although they're anti-American, because they're sort of the international side of the communist coin. They're not the despotic core, they're the international franchise, which is a bunch of classists that want a 95-5 social split. And, oh, believe it, they're super colorblind for their slaves. They don't care what color they are, okay? But they do care about being the 5% of say-sowers. They care a whole lot about that. So if you're like a nationalist, a French nationalist, they hate your guts. That's not how the international works. The international works with pseudo-intellectuals that prep the host country with a whole bunch of blarney so that they can gain access. Okay? Because they don't belong to the country. But if they can export the franchise into a host country that has been blarnified by pseudo-intellectualism, aka the international franchise, then that's what they'll do. Because they do have an expansive component to their aggressive political ideology. So nationalists are just dumbfounded. Like, no nationalist in the world would go to another country and try to impose some type of artificial values on them. But these materialists, godless materialists, they're into that extraction program. They sign up for it. In fact, they recruit people. Put up billboards, join this PMC that has nothing to do with anything. It's just a freestanding independent entity. but they're fighting for human rights type thing. They didn't do that in the Sahel. Oh, by the way, that was French, right? But if the French are the international franchise, why would they have a problem with bringing in despotic muscle to extract whatever the hell they're extracting there anyway under false pretenses of human rights, right? French are on board with the Russians, at least on an international level. Domestically, they've more or less instituted the internationalist program. 95% slaves have no say-so in the country, and if they are too nationalist, they're attacked. Want France to stay French? That in no way is on board with internationalism, globalism, the international of Leninism. It's not on board with that. What? You don't become the 5% of substitutionists by being a nationalist unless it's just as a ploy, like a Toryist nationalist, right? We're gonna stop these dang boats, and they don't do a dang thing. They think that's funny. See, we're dealing with cynical people here that have no morals. Okay, like they really don't have a problem with criminals either. So all these mafiosos and other people that people today in our degraded state think are some type of heroes, they're on board with them too. They're like, what? You'll do anything and give me a kickback? I'm on your side. But it's not like the organization, if something's important, is going to keep those dullards around. As soon as they can be replaced, they will be. And they are. But for a matter of convenience, if they can do something for them, yeah, they'll use them. Which also gets us into the lawfare and the courts and prisons, yeah. How about that? Just go back to that photo where Prigo is presenting George W. Bush some filet mignon. Where did that guy come from? Straight out of the prison system. What does that mean? So all these dummies that think that organized crime is somehow patriotic or worked for them in World War II, those days never did happen the way you think they did. You see people that are associating with people like that, just, you know what you're dealing with. So no, the criminals in the West, they aren't heroes. Just surprise. And putting them in prison is probably not the best thing to do under hybrid conditions. Just so you know. So what does that mean based on the realities on the ground that are unfortunate for them? What does that mean for them? Does that mean good things or bad things coming for them in the future? Like immediate type of decision-making things? So, but returning to the Balkans, so under the aegis of a NATO peacekeeping operation, let's also not forget the UN is a complete gutted institution. It's the WHO, it's the World Health Organization equivalent. Whatever they're doing requires a lot more scrutiny than it's getting. Sending, Indians, the dude Modi, he's a recruit. Look how he interacts with Putin. It's like some type of little chump. When they're around, he's like a little chump. What does that mean? Well, that means all those Indians on the visa program and that whole visa program, what does that mean? Giving them access to IT infrastructure, is that wise under such geopolitical conditions? Or is that the equivalent of treason? Is that also a part that could be attributed to the 800,000 fentanyl deaths? Could they carry some of that responsibility? Yes or no? Oh, but it's so important for moral people to have this abstract concept of lifting people out of poverty. And this is what they do. Once you do that is turn your country into a fentanyl wasteland. When they get the good jobs in these so-called good corporations that are totally cored out with lunatics and criminals, that just subsequently have a very high responsibility for keeping the country from being trashed, where people aren't expecting to be betrayed, but are, type thing. So no, you're not taking crazy pills when you think that these people want global domination, because they absolutely do, and all their actions prove it. So what do we have in NATO right now? We have a situation where Hungary, Slovakia are on the other side, at least politically, and the Turks. Big bad surprise, I know, for people who have had their heads in a toilet and been flushing it for the last 30 years. That's a big surprise for them. So so then you got the Turks. So, and then you got two operations in recent history which were completely misguided. Oh yeah, let's not forget the French. What are they now? They're positioning themselves to elect a Maloney, who's a far right person according to who knows who. The International is now going with that label because they think it's going to win them votes. Far right, just substitute that out with Toryist. This is a Toryist disguise, and nothing will get done. They'll combine it, because think about it. It discredits the far right when they don't make any meaningful changes. So it's a win-win for them if they can sell you it and if you buy it. You'll be like, well, they didn't deliver. I guess I'll go to the far left then. They're all sitting, waiting for you to show up as a disgruntled person, because that works for them too. So yeah, these are sociological games, psychological games, hybrid games. That's what it is. So I don't think this situation is gonna stick. I think NATO is gonna have to reform itself. It's going to have to drop the dumps that it needs to dump. And it has to realize there's now a very high possibility of a Balkan War that's hybrid, that where the Turks are aligned with the Serbs instead of the old method. And taking Libya as the example of that. So that could never happen. Oh yeah, it did. They divided up the country. That's what they did. Just like the French divided up the Sahel with the Mosul. Because, there are 5 types of societies that they institute doesn't look good as far as visuals are concerned. So it was the bad Russians that took over the gold mines that they're most likely getting it cut on. I wouldn't doubt that for a second. So how do you see them? Anti-Americanism. So on low levels, Turkey has it, France has it, and India has it. So, it really does suck if you think you have friends that actually aren't your friends, type thing. But you can wake up one day and just realize that's just the way it is. It's politics, right? It's business. So, and also the disputed territories. U.S. is disputed territory at this point. Other countries in Europe are disputed territories. Poland, there's been a hybrid attack on their political system. Germany is, look how they try to work with France. Look how they're not preparing for anything, really. Just a lot of talk, not a lot of action. We're a year and a half into this thing. Now, they have gotten past the 500 helmets, but just look at how they were right off the bat. What did they do? Oh, change the minister. We got a new one in that's sort of like the old one on a basic level. So what do they want? Yeah, they want 5 societies where they're the nomenclatura. That's what they want. They're classist prigs. They're the equivalent of slave owners in the South before the Civil War. Except it's not just black people. It's white slavery. That's what it is. Hell yeah, they want white slaves. They don't want no black slaves. What? But they'll take black slaves if the white slaves aren't doing what they say. Hell yeah, they will. They've done it. France is horrifying on a macro level, just horrifying. They are literally a Frankenstein monster, and Germany is a second behind them, and Italy is on board too. So again, come back to these damn Kosovo people, also the damn Albanians. What were they doing during Yugoslavian times again? They haven't changed. All that needs to be revisited, reviewed. If you have anything to do with any of them, you need to review your relationships. Because it's very possible that the snow job they did on you doesn't check out. And that does have very serious implications for public security, prosperity, liberty, pursuit of happiness, every damn thing you can imagine. So it's about changing one's viewpoint. And it really is a question, who are the dupes on the NATO side? Like, they're supposed to be strategists? How did they get duped like this for so long? What's wrong with them? Who are the people that made these decisions? Who signed off on Libya and the Balkans and are letting that situation develop as stupidly as it has over the last couple of months? Who are these big brain strategists that have let the Black Sea more or less fall into anarchy? Let the Black Sea get leveraged like that. Who was the big brain strategist? And then nothing being done to counter that. Not enough. Too little, too late. So yeah, politics matters. Geopolitics matters. Being able to identify ideological liars and actors. And realizing, no, even if you profit by anything they have on offer for you, it's not going to be good in the long term for your country or your people. It's not. So if you've taken a deal like that, walk away. Get out. Cancel it. Forgive yourself for being deceived, but don't go along with it. Don't rationalize what you're doing because you're on the wrong side. Once again, it is compassion that brings me back to the Russian people that are in the opposition. I know you exist. I know you exist. If there was a free and fair election, you would win at least by 51%, which is what civilized rules are when governments work properly. Now, I'm not claiming that the United States is functioning properly at this point in time, or that any country has ever functioned properly. So this is not an insult. This is just a statement that civic institutions that are reciprocal are wealthy, prosperous, and desirable, which is what a compassionate person should wish their neighbors, and not a fool would wish destruction. I come back again as a scientist and not as a polemic. The simple fact is that good governance is better for the most people, and that is why it should be developed. It is an essential part of social organization, and if it is neglected, there will be seriously bad causality that results from that, such as having bad relationships with important countries all at the same time. Sometimes winning is losing. If you win at the expense of a good relationship with others, you didn't really win, did you? And so why does that happen? Because delusion is one of the three main defilements. We think we're doing the right thing, we're not. What helps in instances like that? Fact-checking. I'm asking you to look at the facts. Your own facts. And then not to lie, because why would lying be in your own best self-interest? Why? What friend would say, no, then lie about it? Money is not everything. How about the creative bookkeeping? Who are the most creative bookkeepers this planet knows at this point in time? Is it the Chinese or is it the Russians? I'm going to give the Russians the benefit of the doubt, although the Chinese are on a whole other level themselves. Which is really the only thing that's behind their propagandistic presentation of themselves. Lifted people out of poverty, is that right? In a system like that, where it absolutely is by definition 95.5 at best. Is that right? How bad the peasants must have been off before that, just to keep control on things. Well, what if the control itself is a negative influence instead of an uplifting reciprocal influence? Reciprocal internally, reciprocal externally. Ergo, being consistent with good policy, with goodwill towards oneself and others. Why would that not be sound policy? Why must the cynic win when there's no predestiny that anyone wants to see happen? Which is what we have, is a lose-lose situation. So I understand things take time to sink in, and especially truths that nobody wants to be true. The truth of gangrene is a horrible truth. I don't want gangrene to be true, but it's really frivolous and irresponsible not to investigate what it is, how it works, and how it could be stopped. When people have it, that are trying to heal, that are worth healing. That throwing people away is not wise policy. And again, if one is in a situation like that, it's very possible that one was deluded about this thing or another. It's human to make mistakes. Now, those types of mistakes, they're pretty gigantic. Hence, a gigantic negative causality. And yet, if one was deluded and one knows the truth, one can make the right decision. One can apply right effort. And one can change a situation immediately, definitively, irrevocably. Or perhaps gradually warm up to the idea. Take a week or two off all these busy people doing nothing but crazy things. Every single truck I've seen that got blown up in that region, I almost had to sit down and weep. Because that country needs every dang truck it can possibly find. And not for warlike purposes, but for the genuine industries and prosperous peoples that should live there. One of the great things about politics is that you can depersonalize things. See, politics can personalize things, but it can also depersonalize things. Politics can be very abstract, as abstract as you want it to be, as you are capable of seeing it. But for the people that personalize things, make everything about them, make everything about others, and make it this zero-sum game, that's bad politics. So if your culture is typified from that, it's of that or like that, it's bad. It's phony baloney. It's acrimony. It's a goose chase. Real politics is really accomplished, really generous, and really good people all working together, and the results speak for that. Now, we're not talking about a perfect world here, people, but we're talking about improvements versus a reduction in anything. Is the train late 80% of the time when 10 years ago it was on time? Well, then that's what you're looking at. It doesn't matter who did it. It doesn't. Although it does matter. If you can fire the people, for example, that manage that, or got ownership and then change the manager, then you got to fire the owners. And then there's the other thing, depersonalification, or depersonalizing. Train service, it doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to you, but it sort of belongs to us all, and when it's functioning, we all benefit from that. That's a gigantic common ground that we share. You show up after a late night flight. It's 3:30 a.m. and the wind is whistling, and nothing's there, no taxis, nothing. But the train is running on time. Isn't that a great thing? Doesn't that increase one's quality of life? One zips directly to where one lives, can get maybe 1 or 2 hours of sleep, or get something to eat before the day starts again, type thing. Then you're there the next day, you don't miss the conference, etc., etc. There's 1,000 different multipliers of things working well and things not working well. Now I get it. This new dimensionality of the game, which is geopolitical and multipolar, that just got sprung on us all like a jack in the box. Nobody predicted that in 1996. They didn't. They were naively optimistic. And why shouldn't they have been? There was 89 and 91 behind it. 96, whole new year. Europe was integrating. Europe had a practical outlook for itself, and there was a lot of cooperation that was taking place that got rid of a lot of unnecessary bureaucracy and friction. And things were good for a while, but things don't stay good when you got bad people trying to mess things up, because it doesn't work for them, because they're looking for global domination. This is And their domestic system isn't better, but they have a predatory arm to help even things out, so that everybody's barbaric. There's a 95% barbarity and the 5% that pushes buttons, pulls strings to zap people or cancel them because they got the big ideas. And other people don't need to know about what other people say or think. Don't think they exist. Of course, this is just, why shouldn't they? Elephants exist, although I don't want to compare them to elephants. I like elephants, but elephants are also pretty dangerous if you're a human, if you don't know how to interact with them. You spook a herd of elephants, or get between a mother elephant and her calves. The likelihood of you surviving that incident is pretty low. See, modern humans, postmodern, neo-barbaric, ignoramus type humans, they don't have any clue about things like that, but they could figure out things like that by listening to people that know things about that and heeding their advice. And that can be old people and that can be young people too. Wisdom really doesn't discriminate amongst those that are willing and able and capable of embracing it. But it's something that they have to do. Look how many people are just running around doing things right now. They call that an economy? Oh, really? When we got all these big problems going on, we're supposed to carry on with the next commercial. This is another good abstract concept that politics has. This is for the common good. It's not for, you're not getting in front of an issue to win an election, which is what the other side does, because they're that cynical. They're that professional, they think. I don't see any downsides to that, They got bucks. If they're good, if they're really professional, they got bucks. But what does everybody else got? Well, there's the prisoner dilemma. They're the ones that are cheating consistently, and that's what they've adopted as their modus operandi. And you would think, well, why aren't all people good? Why are there criminals in this world? Well, why? Ask yourself why. Whether they exist or not, I mean, it's indisputable they exist. It's indisputable. And so you can abstract that out as well. There's criminal tendencies. And you can see it plainly, abstractly in the prisoner's dilemma, can't you? Can't you understand that principle? Why is it that when you apply it in the real world that you have some type of hesitation? When if you play those games, you can scientifically measure, okay, how many times do people play this way? There it is, there's the tendency. That's what the other side has. But from an abstract level, just like if you're thinking about the efficiencies of engines, for example, there's friction. There's engines that have more friction than others, and they're the friction. So there's engines that have extremely low friction, right? Super modern ones, and then there's old ones that have very high degrees of friction. You need to be greasing here and there. Engine and drivetrain. Think of it also in the complexity, the associations of that, the movements of the economy. And if you've got to grease like all these different joints, like on an old locomotive steam engine, compared to like these magnetic or electromagnetic trains of today, it's a big difference in political technology. Regarding the recent riots in Dublin, which were triggered by a knife attack on children in like broad daylight in the lead up to Christmas by one of the imports to the country that the country never needed in the first place, but is used precisely for, I wouldn't say this type of incident, but it's what is the gray scale of oppression by foreign powers when you have people on the street that are armed with knives and ready to blow up for any reason. The waitress looks at them funny, or some 16-year-old girl rejects their advances, they might be attacked. So isn't that like an oppressive measure when you import foreign populations to interact with the natives in such a way that causes a lot of mayhem and violence and disunity and division? Well, everyone would say, yeah, of course, why would anyone institute those types of policies unless you're dealing with more or less an ideological occupation? So, an ideological occupation is you get young people that want to get a lot of stuff real fast and you filter them through being against their own people in a classist way. So you got educated at this institution, you belong to the cool crowd, because look at this cool professor that knows all these ideas about how to be a real humanitarian, which involves importing a lot of people from outside the country, because we all know that, for example, nationalism, that's horrible. That caused every problem in all the world, right? And then emotionalize. These are political operatives that aren't looking to fight fair. They're not looking to have a fair debate about their issues. They're looking to build out their privileged positions in an imperialistic way under the guise of anti-imperialism, with the full knowledge that they're going to be in the minority, certainly amongst the native populations. Now, all the poor people of the world that they can bring in and then make them allies, that's just their muscle. Whether they know those people are leveraged, and the people that are there know they're leveraged. They know what side their bread is buttered on, or who's ever handing out whatever things they got when they just jumped off the boat. If those people tell them that the people that don't want them to be in their country are the bad people, they don't need to think a lot. You can have an IQ of 80 on average, and you'll still figure that one out. And because you got hands and feet and eyes and a mouth and whatever else, if they've got 100 of your kind freighted in, well, then they got 100 more than the other side has, possibly, where people are just trying to survive in their little 9-to-5 jobs that keep getting fewer and fewer. The median wage goes down because inflation eats up their wages, and they're not getting any raises. So inflation means that on average their per capita has gone down below, for example, the Polish per capita wage in the UK over the last 10 years. Is that not economic warfare? So the really cool thing, though, okay, but let's stick with the political operation thing for a second. So people like that aren't looking for debate. If they have a debate, it's very programmatic how they do it. They want to control the venue, and they're going to stock the crowd with potentially violent people. And after the debate's not over, because the political is the personal. So they're going to take that as an impersonal as a personal attack on their precarious position within the political infrastructure. And they're also going to take inference attacks as, for example, there's a riot, for example. Well, those are people they're going to go after because those are people that are trying to oppose them. And so they crank up the disinformation. They turn the problem from the problem to the people that are so outraged that this is the only thing they could come up with to express themselves. And they're going to make them the problem, and then they're going to apply lawfare to that. So look at all the lawfare companies come in. And these are basically classist agents. So they're profiteers. And being cozy with political operatives that are in power, that is more or less an unlimited money machine. The government, until the government goes bankrupt, the government's checks always cash. But let's say the legitimate outrage of the citizenry, that doesn't pay a dime. So, where are the ambulance chasers going to go? Are they going to go with the classist connected people, be they criminals and money launderers or not? And if we get right down to it, that's essentially what Dublin's become, is a part of a money laundering tax evasion scheme. Well, it's not just Dublin, but that's what it's sort of evolved into, just like the UK. So you bring in foreign moneyed interests like that want to have reliable people in the political infrastructure. They figured out that long term what they need is a divided and conquered populace, and it is worth it to them. They've done the math, like Irish freedom and prosperity on one hand and their scheme on the other. How much money do they get from the latter and how much do they get from the former? So what do they have to do to destroy Irish unity that could lead to political outcomes that are not advantageous for their scheme? It's as simple as that. These are money people. They made a money decision. They made it happen. Because every other economic argument is not on their side. They're subsidizing that. A bad economic argument for everyone else. But they're paying every PR company that will take their money, including what people understand to be the infomercialism of their news outlets, which is a subset of disinformation, which is a subset of military strategy. That they'll pay anyone they can, and they can pay a lot of people because they got a lot of money. A lot of people don't have any money to explain away whatever it is that they need explained away, and to redirect hostility towards people that aren't on the divide and conquer bandwagon like they are. And that, all the tricks, ad hominems, questionable sociological, ideological terms. In my last lecture, I said there is no win with feminism. If you're anti or pro, if you're talking about it, you're misleading yourself and others. Well, put any ism you hear, it can be like that. Racism is another one. You pick up pro or contra, any side, you're losing. You're wasting your time. You're in a diversionary type of situation, and what they're doing is they're just presenting themselves as the aggrieved party or the moral party, when in fact they're not. And so, but what they're doing is also getting a feel for who are the real opposition, And then they're basing that opposition based on this false type of sociological divisionary program. And then they're attacking the people that are opposed to them. So picking it up is the wrong move. The people that try to throw it out there, that try to create that frame, they're the political operators that are disingenuous. And when I say disingenuous, I mean it. It's like enemy operators in wearing the uniform of your country. Okay, did that happen during war? Were there cases where enemies dressed themselves up in the uniform of the opposing side? And it's not just the uniform, they need to have the language, the accent, the mannerisms, possibly the family connections, whatever they could get in forms of legitimacy to not blow their cover. Did that happen? Is that beyond comprehension that someone would do that when that much money is involved? What type of bank robber wouldn't go to acting school if they could get 100 billion euros, I guess is the case there? Of course they do it. They do it. They're invested in that shtick. And this is the other thing. Why is it AstroTurf? Why is it called AstroTurf? Because they use it in different places and it's equally inappropriate there. But it does have political benefits for them. Not just short term, but long term. These types of techniques have been developed over time by some of the most nefarious people on the planet. And like psych laboratories in the Soviet Union and stuff like that. Chinese and Russia, Sino-Soviet psychological terroristic techniques in post-colonialist areas. That's where they started them. Including the United States, they consider that a colony. So they developed this anti-imperialistic technique for divide and conquer purposes. So it's also really appalling to see how little thought goes into these types of attack programs. They just copy and paste things that worked in different places, usually the United States, and then they inject them into a European context amongst a bunch of sham-dizzled, bibbity-wonked populations. And who's feeding it to them? Well, lo and behold, it's classists pretending to be academicians or accredited people from the humanities that if you went back through their curriculum and their teachers would see, oh, they had this whole human torpedo program, and these are the people that didn't drop out of the program. They've got 6-figure salaries and doing quite well for themselves as long as they toe their line. Now, if they say one word on tape, one thing that might reveal that they're imposters on some level, they're not truly dedicated to the cause of world anti-imperialism, they get thrown out of the franchise. They get canceled from their own side. Isn't that sad? But ultimately, yeah, it's a 95-5 split. So they're the 5% that are the profiteers off of a demise program, or general demise program. And then they sort of morph into a place like Belarus, right? You have the one leader, you got the hierarchy, or the nomenclatura behind him, which is the toxic blob. And they have sham elections, like Party A. Now, when you're dealing with someone like that, like a hegemon, someone who's totally convinced that they're the country, like diluted level of dictator that people in war don't play fair and people in culture wars don't play fair, just so you know. And war is hell. And hellish culture creates hellish results, creates crime, poverty, it creates, again, division, creates everything bad. It's bad causality for your side. Their side, they're trying to limit what bad things happen to them, including being portrayed in an unflattering light. All the lies they're talking just straight out in the open. They have, but it's for the domestic audience, the people that don't have access to countervailing sources of information. So if they could block that off from the world, they would too. But they really don't care because they've separated themselves in an alternative reality. Psycho, social, economic reality. You want to connect business with somebody outside the world, you better bet there's somebody in between that has got their hand stuck out. You don't have the right political class's pedigree, no chance that deal going through. And they're willing to live in a country where the per capita is 300 euros a month or something like that. As long as that's not them, they don't. That's actually better for them, because then the people will take their jobs or will say what they want them to say. So isn't that a form of slavery? Well, guess what? It wasn't the slaves that they say were slaves. It's the modern day slaves, you. European, Western slaves, you're slaves. So despite them saying they're the opposite of that, they're the liberators of the slaves, actually they're not. They're the people willing to be slave drivers because they want to be the slave drivers. And slave drivers want slaves. They don't want free people. People with big mouths, they think, messing up. They're photo ops, like what? They don't want people like that. So coming back to a place like Belarus, you had a blogger who was on a plane from Athens to Vilnius flying over Belarus. They had the plane diverted land so they could pull off an internet blogger and imprison him for an undetermined amount of time. They do care about their photo ops, so yeah, they do. That's the point. That's what they did in Soviet Union. That's what they did in Russia after 1917. This is old business. And that's what they're now doing in the Western world with their allies that are homegrown. But they look like you, they talk like you, but they're not on your side if you're not on their side. And that's what it means. That's what has been allowed to happen. Because one of the things they used to do, like in the 70s and 80s when they were getting these programs off the ground, is they would just say, no, this is a conspiracy, you're imagining things, these are crazy, this is the lunatic fringe saying these things. It's only today, now that the World War III is broken out, that you can look back and no, those people weren't lying about this. This wasn't a conspiracy. This is how these people operate. So what does the West, although does have a problem, because these people have infiltrated and they've become entrenched in places. Academia, they won't disavow wokeism. But right there, you know what you're dealing with. So how can these people be that entrenched? Well, they know that they have political cover on some level. Political, legal, economic cover. They can work with their contracts and get paid even though this is what they're doing. That's their job security. So until that changes, and what are we talking about? There's peaceful revolutions. I do want to speak for peaceful revolutions because I did see it happen Euromaidan was more or less a peaceful revolution, although 100 people were gunned down. But up until that point, it was peaceful and it did have good results, which is why they decided to on a full-scale invasion, because they weren't able to take it down from the inside. But from 2014 to 2021, it was more or less successful. Now, they didn't give enough care to their political candidates because, again, all these types of things, these smoke and mirrors type of games, the normal person just can't believe these types of things are happening. They're being misinformed on a daily basis. And the counter information is being suppressed. Counter signals being suppressed. What to do if you can't have a peaceful revolution? Well, really where the rubber meets the road is where the police are. So if you look into countries where they pulled off these types of things that are really degraded, such as the police are very dangerous and politically connected people, but they have a lot of incompetent and corrupt employees, so they sell their guns off to criminals, like for extra money. Like the inventory list says that they have like 1,000 AKs, but if you were to do a physical inventory, you'd find like a fraction of that number. And then there's an inquiry that happens, but it goes nowhere type thing. So there's that potential all the way down the line, or there's just seeing changing your perspective on the police as not protectors of the peace, but suppressionist elements. And then it's more or less you're looking at a struggle. So now that sounds bad, but do realize that regimes rely on the perception of legitimacy. What really pulled the British franchise down in the United States? Well, there was a bunch of incidents, but one of them was the Boston Massacre. So their security forces got to the point, because people were so outraged, that they started firing on the people. Well, what part of legitimacy is that? Well, that they became de facto illegitimate. People started screaming through the streets, "They're shooting us dead." What government can withstand that? So this is So this is the thing. These governments, they fold after an incident like that. They go into damage control mode. Now, the government coming in has to go through all of the blob extensively and get rid of them. If they don't, then they re-establish power just at a later date. They lay low for a while, continue their operations, and at some point in 1999, there they are back in business, going to fix all the problems that they caused, but it was actually attributed to other people, to rowdies and hooligans. They solve hooliganism, right? So yeah, political operators, that's what they do. But that is one way it can go. It can also, if people are serious about solving the problem, they do have to do a thorough examination, and they do have to pull the plug, because they are guilty by association. Close down whatever weirdo university departments they've been able to get established, and do some more public, public awareness campaigns, so that other people can identify these types of operations, and to let other people know that they're happening, and to also shut them down. You fail to do that, It's again like some type of infection. You fail to cure it, it will die down, but it will come back. So you're gonna have to go do a full review, and then you're gonna have to put in preventative measures, and you're gonna have to put in monitoring to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because you know what, freedom, it doesn't just happen. Okay, you need good people doing good things in a multi-spectral, multipolar world. And I know this is complicated for your normal person, but they're establishment types, and the anti-establishment type of people that then form an establishment. Well, who are they really against then? Well, they're against the people. That's what they're against. They go in it looking to set up a tyrannical system, and when they do get in, that's what they set up. Despite claiming that they're working for the underdog. Which also, the underdog, that's where they're coming in. This is their attack vector. They think altruistic people are stupid and gullible and naive. And my goodness, look how true that is. But before you start screaming at your own people for being such dupes, just realize they came in on false pretenses. Who the heck would have thought that a charity is going to have these types of maniacal political operators in them? But you see, they like to mingle with people that are hanging around charities and volunteer work and stuff like that, so that they can influence and perhaps co-opt them and their country off the rails. So that's a vector, an avenue for infiltration. That's why they use it. People have their guards down. And so that's where they congregate. And is that a war crime? Absolutely. But a war crime will only be handed out if you've got the courts, and they've got the courts. So that's not the way they're going to see it. Their humanitarian efforts are quite different than what you thought. So their humanitarian efforts are feeding enemy populations and starving out the native populations. Or again, misdirecting goodwill to bad places. And do they have the lack of morality to do that? Well, yes, they do. They're war operators, cultural war operators. So if you misperceive them, you look at bushes and you say, oh, they're just bushes there, and they're sitting there in camouflage with a blow dart, a poison blow dart gun. Poof. You're hit, you're poisoned. You're either part of their crew or you're going to be excluded because you won't be part of their crew type of dynamic, social dynamic that they've unleashed in the Western world. So these status signalers, virtue signalers, wig flippers, and let's also realize they came in on the psychological and sociological level. So all those white-collar jobs where you got those pseudo-intellectuals with axes to grind, that's the attack vector that they came in on. That's also how they keep bringing in new dumb bodies into their franchises, into their departments. So it's a maintenance and propagation type of operation on that level. So these type of people are a lot more dangerous and a lot more harmful than you would think. Normal people don't think that. No, this couldn't bother. This isn't nothing. These people are way more dangerous and destructive than you think. And not only now, but they have been. And if there's ever a reckoning with them, they're all going to go away for a long time because of that. Because true psychologists, true sociologists, they can see them now. They're like glowing in the dark. Imagine there's a landscape, it's dark, and they're just on fire. That's about how easy it is to spot them. although it is a gray scale. Some are more committed, some are more of the useful idiot variety. That's another funny sociological phenomenon. You talk to an audience about useful idiots, and everyone thinks that because they hear you talking about useful idiots, that they couldn't possibly be one. When in fact, it's a gray scale. How much of an idiot are you? How much of a virtue signaler are you for sociological catastrophes? Let's bring out the ism words that these operators created and distributed. You think you're up on any ism? You read a book about isms? You're a straight up and down stone cold idiot. Now, how useful you are depends on how much you think that's really relevant, or you propagate or have modified your behavior based on that. And then again, how much capacity for self-reflection do you have? You might be overestimating or underestimating things. So would an enlightened leadership class allow any of this stuff go on? No. Well, when have we had an enlightened leadership class? Each country is different. Some countries never had one. And this is a sophisticated, sophist and rhetorical and psychological type of attack. So if you understand these things, you have just a basic grasp of them, you're already phenomenally rare in this day and age. Now that can change. Let people know about it, but on the other hand, just knowing about things doesn't really mean internalizing them or making internal revisions. And you have to realize the people that have virtue signaled for genocidal policies, they're not looking to question what they did. They're going to go to the grave as cultural war criminals. Now, because we are dealing with political operators, aka also sociologists, psychologists, political scientists, etc., realize that they've gone through different scenarios. These people have been involved in overthrowing governments around the world. Now, you don't have to go back to the Cold War for that. You could just go to the Sahel in the last 6 months and you can see it happening. So they understand a lot of things that the normal person doesn't understand, such as, oh yeah, they do know what the Boston Massacre scenario could mean for destabilizing a regime. Now, you would think, well, who would go to those lengths? Well, they would go to those lengths, especially if they perceive you to be their ultimate enemy on the planet, which is what they do. All that anti-Americanism is by design. It's what gives them legitimacy in all of the crimes that they commit, because they did it on purpose. They thought up a bunch of stories that lets them commit crimes. Now, not just anti-Americanism, but also misrepresenting what Americanism is, or not letting it exist. Now, you can replace Americanism with what your country stands for or stood for. You're going to have sociologists trying to undermine that or redefine your history into something that it wasn't. This is what they're doing in the UK, Ireland. Where else have they been doing it? The Netherlands, France, you name it. So these are sophisticated attacks made by sophisticated people, but once you see it, you can see it, and they do astroturf the things that they do. So it's not genuine. It's a franchise. So, but the fact remains that you're dealing with insiders and outsiders, and they do use keywords, and they are guilty by association, because they don't let outsiders on the inside. So you can more or less know if they committed crimes socio-political, economic crimes during their tenure, that everyone involved in that government is implicated. So that's one of the things that is a little bit more simplistic. That does give you an advantage once you know what really is going on. Because if they can keep their cover that they're an essential part and a genuine part of your national dialogue, well then they'll play that till the end. And I do want to come back to the fact that these polished chrome torpedoes, they don't question either what they did or how they think. And ideologically convicted, a criminal is active right in our time. These are very convinced people. And they come from the psychopathic and subnormal sectors of society, and they've been given marching orders, and so that's an open and shut case for them. You're a defender of your country's values. You're the enemy to them. That's how they've been conditioned. And so, yeah, they were the guys on the border. It was a more or less a prison wall. You had no right to travel. So if you wanted to jump over the border, these were the guys with machine guns that shot you in the back and got little trinkets pinned on their uniforms for doing that. They were proud of that. And they're still alive. A lot of them still alive today. Still networking, still involved in political parties. Oddly, many of them are extremely wealthy, and nobody knows why type thing. And very, very active, very busy, very, very networked. A lot of cultural areas you wouldn't expect them to be unless you know what to look for. So don't give these people the benefit of the doubt. They're mixed up with that type of stuff. They're tainted for life. Now some of them might come clean. Now that's what some defectors did, and they did come out and they made a statement and they decided to live differently, but some of them were fakers too. So, is it a tragedy or is it a comedy? It depends on how you look at it. If you're stuck underneath these people, you're stuck under a fake political establishment, you're stuck in a cultural war. It's not fun. It isn't. But you don't have to blame yourself for it. This is just the way these people are operating. That's it. It's not just they're operators, but because they're usually connected with the security services, they have a couple of those, and then they orchestrate and organize whatever black ops they want to organize, and then they implode it. And then you'll have to take a look. Maybe there's a mix of some people who are genuinely outraged mixed in with a bunch of agent provocateurs. But oddly enough, the provocateurs don't go to jail. But then the genuine people in the busted, whatever it was, they're the ones that go to jail for life. So it has that benefit for them as well. Also signals to oppositionalists that you will fail. So it demoralizes them. And this is what they did in Belarus. They had the election, there was a reaction to the election. Now, that wasn't a black op, that was native outrage, but they came down so hard on everyone and had infiltrated so many civic society groups that after it fell apart, they're big into punishing people like that stand up to them in any way, especially publicly. Threatens their grip on power, they come down like a ton of bricks on them. So they're not about being fair and walking away from positions after being discredited. They either flee in fear for their lives and never come back, or if they're staying in power, they're going to fight tooth and nail. Because they're not genuine political operatives. They're the wrecking crew. I recently watched an interview where they had an explainer explain why universities would not question their lockstep, indisputable allegiance to wokery. And the explanation was childish and infantile. It's like, well, I just don't think they're ready. It's too divisive of a topic. What divisive of a topic? You've got institutions funding exterminationist cultural programs. That's divisive. That's an infantile explanation. So let's not forget that they do come out with infantile and ridiculous explanations, and it really is the job of any type of intelligentsia to jump on that, to amplify that, and to not accept that as an explanation. The person giving the explanation. Oh, by the way, this explainer was put up in front of a conservative venue as a conservative ally. That's how he was trying to sell himself. That was his little identity game. But he sort of explained that all of these bad things happening were inevitable, and that no, they're not going to question themselves because it's too divisive. So it's an emotional, again, infantile and childish explanation that isn't acceptable. Look, people in politics, they got to be above that, don't they? They got to be able to entertain different opinions, but not entertaining their opinions, though. The people that are programmatically against the country that they're in by design, those people know. But other people, yeah, the people giving accurate feedback, those are the people need to be listening to. No matter the infantile responses of people that have been psychologically misdirected. And the misdirectors of the psychological misdirection, whether they like it or not. So keep an eye on these explainers. They do have them. Keep an eye on the venues. Keep an eye on the curation of the venue that allows explainers like that to show up. And then look at the final time. How long was the conference? It was an hour and 20 minutes, and they took up how much time? 30 minutes, 40 minutes? Was it 5 minutes? That's that gray area we're talking about. They do like eating up the opposition's time. They do like explaining things, and they do like doing sort of the opposite of what they say they do. For example, they're the law and order people in Belarusia. Well, they're only the law and order people for the opposition. They get the book thrown at them, plus off the books. But what they do, if they're running diamonds from African countries, or running slave rings, you name it, they don't have there's going to be no light shine on their activities, or if some light gets shined on it, gets shut down real quick. The courts give them a slap on the wrist, or just say there wasn't enough evidence, period. So all that needs to go. Once you have this type of disease, you need to go through all of the legal cases. And just as a precautionary measure, you need to just get rid of them all. Now, there's different ways of doing that, but firing them, certainly. I think people that were active during a certain regime, period, every single last one of them should get fired. Don't make any exceptions, and don't let them back into the political processes or in any types of positions of authorities. They lost their right to do that by throwing in with something you can only really throw in with unless you are cognizant of what you're doing. Despite how many excuses they could have later for why they did what they did. It's just not, it's not worth listening to. Now, this is not to say that reprisals are a great thing, although it's pretty understandable when they occur. But on the other hand, just making a decision like that is probably the best thing to do. Some regimes, there's really nothing endearing about them. The entire time they're in operation is a waste of time. It's a time of demise, destruction, disruption, defacement, debasement, and demise. So don't cut them a break. Don't find some reason to rationalize why they weren't as bad as they were. They're worse than you think. They're certainly a lot worse than you think. Now, I said in a previous video that they think just like the King of France did, like Louis V, it was the 16th, I am France. But no, actually there's a switch on that. They think they're better than the country they're in, because they're beyond what the country was, which was an imperialist entity, and they're anti-imperialist. So therein is another luxury, a self-flattering belief that is part and parcel of an alternative reality that they've conjured up out of falsified historical narratives and psychological ping pong. Like rile them up with a couple of stories of atrocities, and then say that these were the good guys, when in fact they weren't. Sort of the opposite of the good guys. But before we overdo the so-called badness of these people, just think it's a self-interested shtick. That's it. It's business for these people at the end of the day. Many of them are extremely mundane people, faceless bureaucrats, little busters and dusters that didn't see any way out through some type of hazing program of the world they were born into, the causality of it. So I also don't think people are eternally damned. I don't share that view. I believe people can change. I know people can change. So, but what is the inescapable law is that bad deeds create bad causality. That's the feedback loop. That should be the feedback loop. We just don't see it. We don't recognize it. We think we're doing the right thing, but we're not. This thinking we're doing the right thing in that case is delusional. And delusion is something we're all born into. Just look at little babies. What do they know about the world? Why should they know what plots and conspiracies and debasings and attacks that have been put into motion by forces beyond their control? If you're listening to this right now, then you were born into a world that had already constructed sophisticated nuclear weapons and had them ready to go 24/7, 365. So when you look at it that way, the lives we were allowed to live for the time that we did live them, even if we were hopelessly naive, that you can forgive yourself and others for being the same way. And for all the real Americans out there, just realize that you were attacked because you were cool. There's something to be said for that. If an enemy punches you in the face, you thought you were worth it to attack. And you were, and you are. So however many millions we have lost or will lose, you're worth it. Or at least you were worth it enough for them to attack you. So just think of the first mover advantage that they had. The whole time they were professing that they were not attacking us while they were attacking us just in places that were not visible, because the organs of information that we were reliant upon in a highly sophisticated, automatized, in post-industrial, industrial society, that we essentially as a society relied on them to do their jobs, and yet they were the people that were disabled. And then just think, were those tough guys or were those nerds with glasses? So how this thing cascaded in its causality is not really what was expected. It's just sort of what worked for surprising reasons. And so why wouldn't an enemy that is essentially exterminationist via their military doctrine not apply that principle in a multi-spectrum way? The only thing that would have held them back from doing that is a morality that they didn't have. They don't share your morality. They share the objective of their leadership, which is to say it's a political decision. How ice cold can those be, do you think? So don't take any of this personally. If you've been horribly injured in an accident, don't call the ambulance chaser, okay? But if you do get injured, work on healing yourself. And injuries come in all different types of sizes. It took many, many years and many, many decades for there to be a recognition of the phenomenon of PTSD, for example. It doesn't make it any less real. On the other hand, it doesn't make it any more determinate than it needs to be if you're able to heal yourself either with an instantaneous insight like this, Satori, that you can change your perspective on something that you thought was non-negotiable because it's you thinking it, but you is itself a delusion at some times. You see this on the sports field. Some people take it the hard way, but they don't have to see it the hard way. Look at the people that look at it as a learning experience. If you can pick yourself off the field and you're not seriously injured, then what was the big problem? What was life determinant at that point? It's just you got caught up in some type of conceptualization and the metrics thereof. It's a common occurrence, it's a normal occurrence, it's a conditioning, but you can also decondition, you can reflect, and you can let go whatever aggravation might be associated with it, because aggravation is the common abstract value that this realm of existence will only ever really offer in its finality. If you think you're going to leave this realm without being disappointed, then you might be mistaken. But dealing with disappointment in such a way that one doesn't allow disappointment to determine the tenor of one's life. One just sees that it was an inevitable part of it, but not the determinant part.